literary art behind you?
Half of it is mine and half of it is my wife. So I've read about half of the shelf.
All right, and it looks like we are live. So thank you all so much for joining Black Millennials for Flint. We certainly, last but not least, we are in Flint within our namesake. For our Black, Green, and Elected series. This series is to celebrate Black History Month. But before we talk about Black History Month, we celebrate Blackness every day, 365 days a year. I am so excited to have some powerhouses in the house tonight, in the virtual house tonight. Celebrating Mayor Neely, Mayor of the City of Flint, also First Lady and CEO, put some respect on her name, Katrina Tillman, and also Kelfani Stevens, a dynamic leader in the city of Flint. So we're going to talk about what it means to be Black, green in this day and age. So we hear the term green spread around a lot, but when we talk about green in the Black space, it means something a lot different. And the people that we have on tonight will be able to speak from an area of expertise about how we can incorporate environmental justice, not just in our community in Flint, but across the nation. So with that, I'm going to actually start with Mayor Neely, who really doesn't need an introduction, but if you want to take some time just to share a little bit about yourself, and don't be modest. Don't be modest. Drop those receipts that you have, and then we'll do introductions with Ms. Tillman and also Mr. Stevens. Mayor Neely.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. I can't help but to be modest. I truly love the community in which I live and which I was raised in, and I have so much appreciation for those of like thinking, such as yourself. Such a sweet, kind, and gentle soul that wants to help edify and educate people wherever you go. And so you are truly, truly the epitome of really what Blackness is in our communities. And Lady Tillman, she is a fantastic, phenomenal motivator. She motivated me to engage this process, and I keep telling her I'm gonna tell it everywhere I go because she motivated me to do so. And Kelfani Stevens, when we recruited him to work for the city of Flint, a dynamic individual, a really good find for the city of Flint with economic development pieces, and he's been an asset to this city. And people don't know this, when we talk about really true love about what you want to do for your communities and for communities of color, Kelfani made more money in the state of Georgia than he does here in the city of Flint. Not that he's in any soup lines or anything like that, but it was not always about economic dollars for people moving our communities forward. And there's an opportunity and time for us to talk about passing the baton. And when we talk about millennials, I'm a Generation Xer, right? Coming from the baby boomers. And so we have a responsibility to make sure we pass the baton to the millennials, empowering you so you can stand and not fall victim to the dominant tendencies of a nation that always didn't like and love Black and brown people. We can look to our Constitution, and it tells us that when they called us 3/5 of a human. We can look to our amendments. If you look into our Constitution of the United States of America, we're probably the only people on the face of the earth that has to have a document that tells us that we're free. And so, we look to the 13th, the 14th, the 15th Amendment as African Americans, and those amendments really speaks to our existence in this country. And so, but now we have to liberate our thinking and our minds, and then everything else will follow. And we talk about the environment in which we live. We have to really respect and honor that. And so that's why this conversation is so important. I was honored by you guys last year. I think it was in DC. I felt like the old guy in the room because I was the old guy in the room. But I'm encouraged by all of you young millennials that has a positive outlook on where we have to go. And if you want to believe it, we can achieve it. And we also have to pray about it. I'm not ashamed of my faith. I am not one of those politicians that turns away from my love of God just to have a speech or be in front of people. I incorporate that in the part of who I am because truly that is who I am. And so I don't want to take all the room, but definitely I want to talk about Katrina and Revive, and the first community in the state of Michigan is going to have a healthcare disparity clinic, talking about what this pandemic has exposed in our communities. We talk about maternal mortality rate. We talk about infant mortality. We talk about all these things that really is a genocide that's right in front of us. We talk about the mass incarceration. We talk about environmental injustice. We talk about the lack of education and economic opportunities. We have to really come together to really speak to that. And so that's why I stepped away from the one thing, the engagement that I'm currently involved in now. And I'm sitting in the car just because this is that important to me. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor Neely. Just the sacrifices that you made, even being here tonight. I was just like, oh, Katrina, I'm like, it's gonna be a gamble. I know that he's super busy, so that means so much, and just demonstrates, your dedication to the city of Flint, your young leaders in the city. So grateful for that. And yeah, we got to connect again. For CBC, we're gonna touch and agree that outside is going to open up and we can safely travel back on Capitol Hill, and shine and show all of the great work that's happening in the city of Flint. So thank you so much. And with that, we're going to turn it over to CEO and First Lady, entrepreneur, Black Girl Magic, Katrina Tillman.
I'm excited. First, thank you, Latricia, and to my other family, Black Millennials for Flint, for all the work that you guys do in Flint, and advocating for Flint and supporting Flint. And not just Flint, but I mean the work that you guys do in Baltimore, now in Memphis, in DC. So I'm grateful to have this conversation. I'm excited to talk about Revive and the work that we're doing, and just to bring some new things to the city of Flint.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, and I see a Noop maybe back there in the background. I see correct. Now I see somebody on the other side, on that other side, but I see
Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Yes, my soror. Yeah.
The pretty connection. The pretty connection. Yes. All right, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you so. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me be here tonight. As Mayor Neely said, I am here because I just love serving our people. This is what I was born to do. This funny story, my name Kalfani actually means future leader. It's derived from the Arabic word Khalif. And when I was a kid, I hated it. I couldn't stand it. I just wanted to be normal. I just wanted to be average. But then I grew up and I grew into my name, and I just love being able to support and help our people. Mayor Neely talked about passing the baton. In my last job, I had an individual who worked for me a couple years younger than me, and I explained to him all of our benefits packages. And he said, okay, maybe I'll take about a year or so, and then I'll go ahead and I'll take advantage of these training classes. And I said, well, why? I said, what's going on that you don't have time to train and learn and better yourself? And he said, oh no, I just need to prove myself first. I said, no. I said, this is part of your benefits package. You earned this when you took this job. You don't need to prove to me anything else. So I got him in those classes. I got him working. And 9 months later, I lost him to another organization because he got a leadership role there. But it's all part of that passing the baton, right? I would rather take someone and lose them to a good opportunity than to take someone and hold them back from the growth that they deserve. And so that's just what we're here to do tonight, where we're here to talk to our people and make sure that we help spread all of the word that we can so that we can have more future CEOs and more people who step out on faith and create organizations like Black Millennials for Flint.
You just said a word there. So two things that I want to highlight is walking out on faith. And I'm gonna add another layer to that about being obedient. And we all know about that. This work with working with the community is so sacrificial. And sometimes you have to be real where you have to ask God, like, again, I got to do this again, but it's so worthwhile to see the outcomes and the impact. The second thing that you mentioned that is so great for this conversation about young people is establishing a leadership pipeline. Far too often we hear older generations telling young people, wait your turn, right? But when you think about some of the most prolific leaders in our history, MLK was in his 30s, as was Malcolm X. So I think that is really important and so valuable to not like be like white supremacy and keep your foot on somebody's neck because of their age, but allowing them to be free. So that was really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Y'all done gave me this energy at night. I needed this. All right, so we're gonna shift gears just a little bit. So I like the fact that you talked about like the leadership pipeline. So we now are in a new administration. And so, the tyranny has ended, praise God. And so now we are looking at the promise of a new day. So with the Biden-Harris administration, they said two things that are really, really key for the Black community. So one is to center environmental justice. This is the first time in history of all elections that they actually used the language environmental justice. So that's a win within itself. The second thing that they've been focusing on within the Biden plan is around a green economy. And so a lot of times when we as Black folks hear people talk about work and jobs, it's like, are you talking about the high paying jobs? Are you talking about the lower labor jobs that's not going to really pay me? So when we think about this new administration and their priorities, what impact do you think that may have at the local level? Anybody can start.
Well, I can just tell you this, is that like when you talk about a new breath, we talk about, the White House previously being affected by what I call PTDs, politically transmitted diseases, and how it had an infectious effect all across our nation, right? And so now we can start to really take a look at really what is going on, especially within our environment. But then we have to really look at the environment between our left ears and our right ear, right? And so we have to clean our mind up, right? And so we have to understand what environmental injustice really is. And so we have to have a candid conversation about our communities. Because if it's our communities, sometimes it's not always people importing the garbage and debris or the environmental things that's happening in our community. Sometimes it could be us, right? It could be just blight issues, dumping garbage. It could be just that environmental pieces. It could be talking about, who is actually doing what to us and understanding what is, and standing up and then uniting with a united front, talking about our principles and what our agenda is about cleaning up in our environment. And so I think this administration will not get in our way, but they will support us, but they can't do it for us. We have to do it for ourselves, and we won't have an obstacle of a White House or a state house or a municipal house in our way as we move forward. So we have to do it for ourselves, mostly to make sure that we catch the bad actors that will poison our communities, that will devalue communities of color, low to moderate income areas. We can't let them devalue us, and we have to be our best advocate for ourselves, and then tell them what our agenda is. We won't have those impediments when the White House says this is one of their priorities, but we all have to get behind a certain agenda and push.
Absolutely. And Mr. Stevens, as you were giving that powerful intro, talking about the power of the Black dollar. So how can we make sure that we are visible when we talk about this green economy, this green workforce development? How will that impact our people in Flint?
So I have a one-word anecdote. Pho. And so some of you may say, pho, what is that? It's Vietnamese soup. And I say pho as an anecdote because it's all about exposure. I have yet to meet a Black person who doesn't love pho. But you know what? They had to be exposed to it. They had to have an opportunity. They had to be open to the thought of, and not say, what? That's some Vietnamese stuff. I don't know what that is. So how do we take advantage? How do we be part of it? When Mayor Neely comes to you, when Latricia Adams comes to you, when Revive Center comes to you and says, hey, what are you doing, young person? What's your plan after you graduate high school? Okay, you've graduated high school and I see you have this job. Does this job pay you enough money to pay your bills? If the answer to those questions is I don't know or no, open your mind. And when the next person says, hey, here's this training opportunity. If you go to Mott Community College and take these 3 classes, you will now be certified and be able to do this thing. Try it. Because once you try it, you might find that you like it. And then once you find that you like it, you might find that, wait a minute, not only am I good at this, I also have other skills and I can start my own company and we can go out and get contracts. And part of the way we can go out and get contracts is by talking to Kelfani Stevens, who will connect you with the Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Did you know that the federal government created a whole agency specifically to find Black, Latino, and women-owned businesses to give them contracts? That's the whole reason why they exist, to help small minority women owned enterprises, to help them get contracts. So if you have the skill set and you have the desire, we're here to help you do it. So you just have to be open. Look at that.
That was the perfect segue from First Lady Tillman. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I love about Mayor Neely and his team that he has assembled with Kafani and so many other individuals who are qualified in the area that they work in, because it is having that mindset of a village, right? Like, listen, what are you trying to do to better help the community? And with Flint being predominantly Black, it's going to circle, it's going to trickle down within our village. And so it's a blessing to be able to, have a center like Revive Center within Flint, and have those resources and access to the mayor so that we can get other contracts and things of that nature to help fund and to help produce and further our mission at Revive.
Yeah, and what's really dope about this conversation is when we talk about green jobs, it can look a myriad of ways, right? So I think that it's really important, that exposure part, with introducing our young people to the endless opportunities of ways that you can engage in a green workforce. So a quick example to connect back to Revive. So Revive was a major contributor to, we just released White House recommendations for maternal health. And so as we start to talk about environmental justice from a federal level, we thought that it was important to talk about that intersection. And so who knows better than people in Flint? So when you think about what happened with the Flint water crisis and how that impacted mothers and how it still impacted mothers and will impact generations to come, that's the green workforce. So it can look like all sorts of ways. I know, for example, because, I used to be a teacher, and a lot of my beautiful Black babies will say, well, I don't really like math. I don't really like science, and automatically assume that STEM careers look a certain way, but it's so diverse. But it's up to us to be able to expose our young people to all the different ways that you can engage, even like with project management. If you got some business savvy, some hustle, we need that, in green careers in the green sector. So I like the fact that everything kind of coalesces and comes full circle where it makes more sense. Black people, we like tangible stuff, like make it plain, right? Make it plain to us where it makes sense about how we can actually utilize our talents in that space. So I'm so excited to hear some of the moving and shaking that's going on in the city of Flint. So transitioning a little bit. So I would be remiss, and First Lady Tillman knows this is my ministry around policy. So I'll give a quick anecdote. So the first time that I met Mayor Neely and his team at the time was to talk about policy. So when Mayor Neely served as rep for the city of Flint, for the Michigan legislation, he introduced a bill mandating testing for lead in school drinking water. Now, believe it or not, it's barely 10 states in this country out of 50 that actually has that type of mandate. So even to think about having that as a piece of legislation was very progressive. And so my question is, as it relates to green policy, environmental policy, why is it so important for Black people to enter into those spaces?
Well, we have to be able to make sure that we have laws that's going to make us productive as a community, right? We have to have quality of life laws, right? And so when we look at the bill that you're talking about, we talk about child care centers in elementary schools. The thing that we value the most as parents, I know we love our children more than anything, even our own lives. And so we take our children and the things that we love more than ourselves, our children, and we take them to schools or daycare centers. What's going to happen when they're out of our care? And so we have to make sure that the impurities that could find themselves in water, like Flint has experienced and what we're still working our way through, we want to make sure that we have safe spaces for our children to be in. So that's why it was very important to put that legislation forward, to start the dialogue and, to try to push those things to the forefront. And then also, when we make a transition, we cannot forget the strides that we made. And when I talk about passing the baton, that legislation never made its way into law. So, but now I'm very happy to say right now, this year, that legislation has been reintroduced again from the city of Flint. So that baton was passed on to the new state representative from the 34th district. And that legislation has been moved and it is moving through its way. And I'm pretty confident to say, I believe that legislation will make it into law this session. That means within the next 2 years, that will be a law. And so I'm very happy to say that. So we have to engage those type of legislation that empowers us, because remember, when I talked about a few moments ago, the Constitution of the United States of America, had it not been for legislation and amendments made to the Constitution, we still would be an indigent service or viewed as 3/4 of a person. If we didn't have the 13th or 14th or 15th Amendment to the Constitution, and that's by way of legislation. And so we live in a society that's governed by laws. And so we have to be able to understand how to get in there and change it. We can't talk about it. We can't complain about it. We can't preach on it without the activity of doing it. And so that's what we have to do. And that's what we've been doing, making our way to doing those type of things and improving the quality of lives and as a byproduct of changing laws. That's the real outcome. We know it's, injustice is out there, but how do we do it right? And so, but thank you for remembering that.
Yes, and it has been a pleasure working with Representative Neely. We got the other Neely, the Flint version of Barack and Michelle. But it has been so exciting to see that bill still has momentum. One thing that I want to mention, and I'm gonna pick, I guess, on myself, even though I'm a seasoned millennial, it's important when you work in the policy space that you have to be patient. Policy doesn't happen overnight. It takes, oh my gosh, like so many phone calls, so many meetings, tracking folks down, trying to convince people. You got to think about both sides of the aisle, and I think with the younger generation, it's important for them to be exposed to what the process looks like, because if you're looking from the outside, it's easy to think that nothing is happening when so much is happening. It just takes time. So I'm so glad that hope wasn't giving up on that bill. I know it wasn't for us, where I, was just like, hey, what do we need to do from our end to make sure from a community perspective that we're still pushing for that policy. Shifting gears, still on that same topic, and I'm gonna bring this to Mr. Stevens. So with Black Millennials for Flint, we introduced a new pilot leadership program called the Flint EJ Griot program. You notice that we real woke with our language. And so EJ Griot, meaning that the Flint community actually controls the narrative around environmental justice, as opposed to all of these external entities wanting to come and do research and talk about Flint. Let it come from the Flint community. And so one of the things that they did that was so inspiring and powerful, they actually developed what's called a Flint Green New Deal. So if you follow Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, like AOC, where she could be a little bit controversial, introduced this really progressive way to think about how we can address environmental justice. So I thought that it was so cool that these two Black women, Flint natives, were able to introduce that to both Senator Ananick, and also was able to introduce it to Congressman Kildee. So leading to my question, so one of the questions that came to Congressman Kildee's staff was, Congressman Kildee is dope. He is down for the cause, and said that he was very much, engaged on that workforce development piece connected with the Biden administration. But here's the kicker. What provisions are going to be made to ensure that there's equity with Black and brown people, not just minorities? Because white women, and no shade, can be considered a minority. How are we going to make sure that those provisions are going to be made for Black and brown people? So what would be your suggestions around how to make sure that there's visibility when we talk about potential funding, with Flint being a majority Black city? How can we make sure that if that funding or resources start to sprinkle down, that it's coming to Black and brown people?
You know what? That is a wonderful concern to have. And I would say first, look to the activities of the presidential election of 2020. Look at the amazing power that Black people had in getting 2 Black senators elected in Georgia. That didn't happen because we sat at home. That didn't happen because we complained. It didn't happen because we became warriors on Facebook. Facebook was part of it, but it wasn't because we were warriors on Facebook. It was because we got on Facebook and we called ourselves out and we said, cousin, are you going to be at the polls? Sister, are you going to be there? Brother, I'm coming, I'm picking you up. We had to be at the table. We had to self-select to be at the table because there were all sorts of roadblocks that were put in front of us to keep us from getting there. And so we talked about policy doesn't come easy. It doesn't come overnight. It is a long, slow process. Sometimes people compare it to making sausage. Mayor Neely talked about the U.S. Constitution and different things in there. Just think about it. We went, as Black people, we went from being property, nothing more than property, to being 3/5 of a person, to being free, but not really. And because we had to free you, we're going to put this clause in there that says that if we arrest you 3 times, we can make you a slave again. Like, don't get it twisted. If you haven't seen 13, go watch 13. Go read the 13th Amendment. Read the actual words today in the U.S. Constitution, what it says about freedom. So that's a long way of saying, how do we make sure that happens? We stay involved. We watch the Sunday shows, read the paper, see what's happening, see what's being suggested, see what the language is that they're debating. And when you see that that language does not pertain to you in a positive light, call your congressman, write your senator. Because like you said, you called them out by name. They are open to listen, but they can only listen if you talk.
Drops mic on that. You are absolutely right. I was just like, let me get the people in front of the people that's the decision makers. That's the first step. A closed mouth don't get fed. And, you know, as powerful as social media is, you know, if you taking it back to Georgia, I don't know how many doors people had to knock on or how many phone calls had to be made along with, you know, the power of social media. It has to be all of those things. It can't just be one strategy. So absolutely. And bringing it to First Lady CEO Tillman, the power of bringing maternal health into a policy space. Just kind of talk about the importance of that.
Yeah, that's definitely important. We know that there's a large difference in terms of the health disparity with maternal and infant mortality rate as it pertains to Black and Brown women. And so we at the Revive Center are trying to address that head on. Revive is an integrated community health center that addresses structural inequities as well as health disparities in the Flint and Genesee area. And so our first initiative is to combat and bring down those numbers within Flint through our Revive Village program, which we are extremely excited about. It's a grassroots program that is going to help so many expectant mothers. And we just really went back to our roots. You know, it takes a village, right? It takes a village to raise a kid. And so with the Revive Village, we place the mother in the middle and surround her with different services, workshops, and things of that nature to make sure that she's educated first about the changes her body go through. A lot of times when you go to a doctor, especially if it's a physician that doesn't look like you, they might not understand some of the issues that are going on outside of your body, i.e. issues that's going on at home, right? That can cause a lot of stress to the mother. And so at Revive, we provide those resources to help her as she's expecting and to make sure she's educated, know about breastfeeding and the importance of that and knowing about her rights once she goes into the hospital. We actually have a lady on staff who is a African-American woman, a certified doula. And so that kind of language, especially to millennials, is new. We think, oh, if I'm expecting, I need to go to the hospital. And sometimes the hospital isn't the safest place for you to go if you look like us. And so because the narrative is out there that Black women can take pain, right? We can take more pain. But when I'm telling you it's time for me to push, and you're telling me, no, it can't be. And I'm telling you, yes, it is. That can cause issues. And so we just want to make sure that we equipped local mothers, not only of the changes that their body is going through, but also provide those resources with other community efforts that we have partnered with throughout Flint as well, and to make sure that they know about their rights and things of that nature. So to have legislation to back that up is key, you know, because we all know, I mean, when you just Google it, you know that there is a disproportionate rate in terms of Black women dying and giving birth versus white women. There's a real issue there. And so I'm just glad that this administration is listening, is acknowledging. I think that's the first step to change, to acknowledge that there is an issue. And so we've heard that from our Madam Vice President. And so we're looking forward to working with them. And I was just so honored to represent Revive and be on that legislation that we're trying to get pushed through.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we have go ahead, Mayor Neely, and then I'm gonna introduce Pastor Tillman.
Yep. I'm gonna have to apologize. I'm gonna have to get back to this event. They're calling me to come back in. But you know, I want to just tell you this. You know, this is Black History Month, and you know we talk about 365 days a year, so we have to honor ourselves and honor our community. So I want to encourage all those that are listening to this and all of you guys to just reach out to your neighbors, friends, and family. And as it says that, let's keep peace in our communities. Let's keep peace with one another. Let's figure out ways to lay down the weapons of words and hostility toward one another as God would have us do. That is the only way that we really can survive and strive as a people. If we truly understood who benefited from us being divided, we understand our enemy. And so we need to stand together, work together, and live together, and we can do marvelous things. And so I want to lift everybody up with that. And I want to say, God bless all of you, Lady Tillman and Kelfani. I know we got a meeting in the morning, Lady Tillman. I'm going to keep making sure that we're going to support Revive, because that is the word that we need to do, is revive our community. And through the millennial scope, that is how it's going to be done. And thank you so much for hosting this activity and allowing me to be a part of it. And I'm going to be supportive, and just call on me anytime.
Thank you so much, Mayor Neely. You are a blessing. And go back in. I don't want you to get in trouble with your event. So I appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you. God bless. All right, bye-bye.
All right. So we have the other Tillman that has joined us in his regalia. Yes. Pastor Tillman, before we move on with some of our questions, if you just take just a minute or so just to drop your receipts. Mr. I hold a key to the city of Flint. Just share a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so very much. God bless you, Sister Adams, and to those on the Zoom tonight. My name is Ezra Tillman. I'm pastor of the First Trinity Missionary Baptist Church. Have been honored to be one of the first and youngest ministers of Flint to receive Key to the City. It was in respects to the work that we have done through the water crisis over the past 5 years, and linking with some other star power across the country through some philanthropy work to bring other resources to our city, especially the water box that was pretty much birthed and designed from Flint, Michigan, and now it's moving across the country. Of our last report, I believe 3 boxes on their way to Newark, New Jersey, and we have plans for it to go out the country into other areas in which we know needs quality water. And just grateful to be used and be in leadership to change the narrative of how we're seen as people of color and as Black men.
Yes, he came in strong and ready. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what's so powerful, sometimes, when we think about folks that get keys to the city, sometimes it's like celebrities, like folks, that have made it out in Hollywood, but it really is so inspiring that someone who has truly been a steward to the community is recognized by receiving a key to the city. I know, for example, like I said earlier, I'm from Memphis. I remember when 3-6, the rap group, got a key to the city for, I think, what was the Hustle and Flow. I'm like, okay, like that's nice that they get that recognition, but it means something, to people who are working hard or are diligent and servant leaders to see that type of recognition. So I wanted to make sure that I acknowledge that. So we got time for about 2 more questions. I feel like I am at home, but this just feels so good. This whole energy. Yes. It don't even seem like we've been on almost an hour. So my next question that I have for you all is specifically, and this is a really good segue. So while Flint, just rocked the nation as it relates to issues surrounding water and lead in water, that's not the only environmental justice issue that exists in the city of Flint. So Flint is most known for being Vehicle City, right? By First Trinity, you can see the whole, arch that says Vehicle City. And while the automobile industry provided, a phenomenal lifestyle for generations in the city of Flint, it also, impacted the environment as well. And some of that legacy pollution still exists. So my question for you all is, how do we keep people just in general, particularly Black people, educated about environmental justice, the different ways that environmental toxins can show up in our neighborhoods? Because it's in our neighborhoods, folks that look like us, right? So how can we keep folks up to date and educated on just ways to protect ourselves from those environmental hazards? And anybody can start.
We'll start just from being Black History Month and thinking about what has, built and has structured our people in the form of survival, is to consider the quality of health And that means that most of us survived because we didn't have doctors. We couldn't afford medicine. And so we depend upon living off the land. And so while we were considered poor, we was plenteous because we had our own garden, we had our own bees, we had our own greens, we had our own cows, and we had our own goats, and we ate from that which we had produced. And so if you want to go back to those bare roots and look at all the illness in our communities, there are plasma places everywhere, there's kidney places everywhere. Why is everywhere African Americans or people of color at there's sickness and illness? And then look at, if you want to get back to bare roots of how we were surviving, how we made it over, you got to look at the quality of things you have. If you have to struggle to get fresh produce in your neighborhood, and then if you want to raise your own, if you don't know the water, if you know the water is poison or the land has been dumped with all type of asbestos and things of that nature over the years, and you can't even find a way to get quality of life unless you go across the border to the suburbs. And so that means you got to start raising hell about what's going on in our neighborhood, what is in our soil, what is in our water, what is in the air. And so we can get those particular rights that was written for our benefit to actually put in place in our communities. And if you don't hold anybody accountable to it, because whoever you have in office is your cousin or you go to church with them, then you're still going to continue to die generation after generation because you're not looking at your own survival. We made it because we grew our own. We made it because we knew that that wasn't no artificial stuff. We was giving grain to that hog, all right? So we know what we was putting in and what was getting out. So we have to question what is being put into our things, what is being put into our environment, because if I want quality of life, I have to demand that these policies in place to protect that for me as a citizen.
Come on, preacher. Yes, Mr. Stevens, I just had to acknowledge that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I want to build off of what he said. You know, he talked about growing our own. Well, the first part about growing your own is you have to know what you're growing. I mean, just stop and think about that. You have to know what it is that you're dealing with. Again, another quick anecdote. My wife and I love tea, all types of tea, right? So black tea, green tea, herbal teas, all types of teas. So when she was pregnant, her doctor said, he specifically asked, do you drink tea? And she said, yes. And he asked what kind, and she started to go, he said, you need to stop. You need to stop right now because all of those different herbal teas, we, Western medicine, have not done studies to determine what effects they have on pregnancy. But he knew enough, and he actually was a Middle Eastern man, but he knew enough to say, we know that all medicine comes from the natural world. You may go out and take a pill and it may have some kind of fancy, crazy name, and it may have been made in a laboratory. But if you trace it all the way back to its beginnings, it started as a plant somewhere. And someone did a trial and a study and found out, oh, this particular piece of this plant, this chemical in this plant has this effect on the body. And so we need to think about that. And so we need to think about our environment, and we need to think about where we are choosing to live and how we are choosing to live. And so we need to be intentional about who and what we allow in our lives. And so even though you may be renting that place that you are in, when you rent it, the four walls, the borders of wherever it is that you are, that's yours. And you need to take care of it just like your grandmother told you, or your grandpapa told you, or however far back you want to go, whoever house it was that you grew up in, just like they told you, I don't care how much it costs or how little it costs, it's yours. You have pride in it, you take care of it. We have to take care of our environment. We have to be intentional about our environment. And part of that is education. Part of that is saying, going back to what we talked about, what are you doing with yourself and what are you doing to help get you to the next stage? So we talked about Revive Center and what they're doing to help people. Did you know that the city of Flint, if you have a small business, if you're an entrepreneur, whatever, we have loan programs. And now everybody wants a grant. Everybody wants a grant. And grants are nice. But grants are few and far between, and grants have a whole lot of strings attached. I even these big companies, I tell them all the time, don't come and just say, what's the grant money? Tell me what your gap is. Tell me what your ability is, and then I will help create a program that best fits your need. Because it's not about the grant. Because if you design your program around my grant first, you may end up designing a program that's not even possible to make money. You're not being you're being intentional. You're being intentional about finding the money, but you're not being intentional about the life that you are trying to lead. And just it all stems back to the beginning. What are you growing? What are you putting in your life? And what did you put in your life? What you reap, so shall you sow. I mean, it's everything we needed to learn. We learned in kindergarten. We just have to go back and think about it. We learned it when we were in Sunday school, but we were too busy playing around. Now that you're grown, you got to go back and revisit those lessons.
Absolutely.
Can I jump back in?
Yeah, come on, Pastor.
Great segue. The point that I heard him say continually is we have to educate. You have to be educated. You have to be informed. Did anybody see Judas and the Black Messiah? Anybody see that movie?
Oh,
Right. So,
not yet.
like the richness of the meat of us in struggle and advocacy and beyond came from Black, young, educated, and informed minds. And they was raised up with being educated and being informed of the facts, of the laws, of their rights. And so we have walked away from that. We abandoned it as being necessity. We're looking at our schools where kids are being pipelined to jail from 3rd grade because they can't read. It has to be a recommitment back to educating our own. That's what I heard Brother Stevens says. You got to know. You got to know this stuff.
And that's one of the reasons why when we decided that the Revive Village would be our first real initiative that we kind of address at the Revive Community Health Center, the lack of education that we found in just our research that women of color are not getting is so it's alarming, you know, and so that's why we wanted to make sure that they get educated on the changes your body is going through, why you was good yesterday, but then today you ready to pop off. You know what I'm saying? Being pregnant, and then also understanding and having that knowledge of how your environment around you, what's going on around you. It sounds elementary, but when you really talk to some of these women, they really don't make that connection that, you know, this relationship that I'm in, because it's toxic, is causing stress on my child. You know what I'm saying? So being able to have workshops and women that look like us really speak to those things and be able to have that knowledge of, you know, the different tests, and really thoroughly explaining the different tests that you take while you're pregnant. Why are you taking a glucose test? You know, sometimes when you go to the doctor, they just say, okay, I need you to come next week, drink this liquid. We're going to find out if you got diabetes. Why is that part of, you know, it's answering those questions as to why do I need to take that? So we want to make sure through our Revive Village that all expectant mothers that come and join our village for free for them, that they can be educated and they can understand these different challenges and things and questions that they may have that they might not feel comfortable asking a doctor, you know, simply because you don't look like me, or maybe you're a male doctor. So having that staff and that support and making sure that they're well educated on their rights, knowing what happens when you go to the hospital, if you choose to go to a hospital, educating you on birthing centers. A lot of times most doctors don't really support that, you know, because they want you to go to the hospital that they're affiliated with, versus giving you all of that education and allowing you, the mother, to make that decision for yourself and for the child that you're carrying. So we are just excited about bringing this to the community and making sure that these mothers become a part of our village.
Sister Adams, if you don't, let me pull on your wealth of knowledge real quick. I know that organization and areas and places to find, you know, communities to educate. What should we do as leaders, and what should we do as responsible, you know, people of the village to filtrate that knowledge to another generation or to our own, to change that narrative? You know, I know we can say what we can do, but what's some places we need to look to first to do versus creating something? What can we link to make that happen?
So the first thing, and this is probably going to sound real crazy, but I promise it's not, you have to make information fun. You have to make it engaging. A lot of, especially when you talk about environmental justice and when you talk about maternal health, and that's a whole nother topic about how when we talk about sex, when we talk about our body, when we talk about reproductive health, it's taboo. Now, y'all might be a little bit more progressive in the Midwest, but I'm from the South where we don't even have sex ed. So I went K through 12. I ain't learned anything if my mama didn't tell me. That still exists. It's getting a little bit better. So that's the first thing is figuring out a way what resonates with Black folks. We know Black culture, and how can we mix that Black culture with that educational information? Far too often, things are not accessible and stuff is boring. I know that sounds real childish, but it's not.
No.
If things are very technical, we even have to think about, while we're all educated like on this call, the reality is our education system is trash. And, the reading level across the United States, regardless of race, is at a middle school level. So we have to think about what are palpable, tangible ways that we can really connect with folks. So for example, I think about what we did, before COVID, like with Young, Gifted, and Green. We have to put a whole different spin on it. We still were, spitting out knowledge, about environmental justice, but you got to get the people there first. And I know you know about that as a pastor. Like, what can we do to engage the people to make them feel like this is important to learn about? I think that's really important. And when you are a scholarly person, you have to really let your guard down. Everybody's not about their life. Everybody ain't reading, all of these books. What can you do that makes it accessible to everyone? You have to really think out of the box. I know, like I keep saying, I'm a seasoned millennial. We've started with Black Millennials for Flint, engaging with Gen Z, because they be talking about us, y'all. They be like, millennials old, like old people use Facebook. I'm like, dang, really? Oh man, but we need to hear that. When we talk about we want to engage everybody, we have to listen and keep our ears to the ground, think about the age group, how we can be more intergenerational. We got to just stay hip to the game and meet people where they are. So that would be my piece of advice.
Before we step away from this, I know we're getting close to 8 o'clock, but I got more time than 8 o'clock, and what I'm about to say is important. Sis Adams, you just said something that was really burning on my heart that I was hoping that we wouldn't get away from. And you were talking about, everybody doesn't learn the same way, essentially is what you say. Everybody doesn't want to do this. Everybody's not going to sit down and read War and Peace from beginning to end or whatever else it is. But everybody is going to get some kind of education. The question is, what are you educating yourself with, and what are you doing with that education that you receive? And I really want to stick on the word education and not degree, not school, not saying that you have to go to somebody's college. Educated, learning, knowledge. Because I'll tell you right now, I speak 3.5 languages fluently. I have a master's degree. I have a postmaster's certification. I can run down all the elemental P's behind my name. But you know what I can't do? I can't change the solenoids in my car. You know what I can't do? I can't rewire my house. So I'm always going to have to pay somebody to do those things because I don't have that education. And you don't need a 4-year degree to get those specific skills that I just talked about. You can see the little twist in my hair. I couldn't twist my hair to save my life. If I didn't have my whip, I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I would do. So there is all sorts of education out there that we need to be about getting, and we need to be proud about it. Like I don't care who they are. Don't let anybody tell you that the only way to success is through a 4-year university. I went to a 4-year university 2 different times, right? I got the letters behind my name to prove it. But that was the path I chose. It doesn't mean that that's the only path. So don't let anybody tell you that's the only path. That I just had to say that.
You have to drop mic on that.
Into that.
Yes. So I hate to end so abruptly. We got to stay connected. So, Brother Stevens, I know you are part of our tribe now. Like I mentioned earlier, we are very intentional with our words. You know, my brother and my sister down here, they are already in the tribe. So you are now in the Black Millennials for Flint tribe. So we have to stay connected and fellowship in this work. I thank you all so much for joining us late this evening. You know, really appreciate you all staying devoted to the community and staying in partnership with us. And so with that, you all have a phenomenal rest of the night. Thank you to everyone that was watching, and be blessed.
Thanks for having us.
Amen. Thank you for having us.